Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at a very, very unique rifle. Very unique in the fact that there are very few that were even made, let alone even fewer that were put into the United States. The SIG 550-1 sniper rifle. Now, Swiss Arms, if you are familiar with them at all, these are manufactured obviously in Switzerland. The SIG 550-540 family has been in service with the Swiss military for quite some time. And the rifle is basically a long stroke piston system. The Swiss manufacturing is stellar. There's absolutely no question. Now, when these were first brought into the U.S. was prior to the original assault weapon ban and importation ban. So we're looking at probably in the late 80s to early 90s when there was a ban put on importation, which is what affected these. Now, since then, the rifles that had been pre-banned, the price was absolutely astronomical. You're looking at between $5,000 to $10,000 for a Swiss-made rifle. Now we take a look at this particular model here. This was even fewer. This particular rifle with a 25.6-inch barrel was even fewer. This was not designed as a military rifle. This was basically designed for the police. There was a small contract that went to Jordan as well. Most of the time when you're looking for a sniper-type rifle or a longer-range rifle, you're not really looking at 5.56. You're looking at something in 7.62 in that era. But that was what the requirement was for 5.56 version of a DMR-type rifle, which is what you see here. Now, there's a couple different configurations the way these came into the country. Now, this one here, you see, has a side-folding stock. Now, the original rifle had a asininely fully adjustable stock for pull, for length of pull, for cheek, for everything. So that was very, very different. This is a standard military-type stock, which is both side-folding and has the ability to have some telescopic as well. So basically, you can have a longer sniper rifle with a, well, I guess you could still call this somewhat more compact than it originally was. But you had that as well. On top, you had the ability to mount the sling. Now, the original rifle did not have backup sights on here. However, this particular version does. Once we take the scope off, we'll take a look at how those sights work. So we're talking a little bit about this barrel first and foremost. Now, the rifling twist on here is very different compared to what we have here in the United States. The Swiss utilize a 1 in 10-inch twist rifling versus a standard 1 in 7. The ammunition that this was designed for was a Swiss-made GP90 ammunition, which was a 63-grain full metal jacket. Now, Switzerland was they went their own way when it came to the NATO criteria for 5.56 NATO. Now, the original ammunition as we know it is a 62-grain round with a penetrator core. The Swiss did not like the original version of that rifle. They didn't like the accuracy that was affected, but they also didn't like the terminal performance. They felt that the standard 5.56 NATO was inhumane. Basically, because the bullet, when it would enter a target, it would yaw, it would come apart at its cantilever, and it would go into multiple different components, causing what they considered inhumane. The way that they designed their projectile was they eliminated the penetrator core, and they made a thicker jacket so the bullet would not come apart. So that was one of the things that the Swiss did want to do, and they found optimal was a 1 in 10-inch twist. Now, several of the rifles that they did export in the early days, they were a 1 in 7-inch twist. However, the Swiss generally used a 1 in 10-inch twist. Now, the barrel we have on here is a heavy barrel. It's cold hammer forged, 6-right lands and grooves. Heavy. We will be able to take a look at the barrel a little bit when we take the sucker apart to take a look at. Now, if you look at the handguard on here, you will see that we have a bipod. Now, this bipod on here is, as you will see, it is extremely long. And when you're on the prone position, it's very, very impractical. The rifles that came in initially had a much shorter bipod, which was a lot more practical than this one is here. But you also have different handguards that are available for this as well. The trigger that we have on this one here, this is a standard trigger. However, you also find a trigger shoe that goes on many of the sniper rifles that came out of Switzerland as well. This is more of a standard. Now, this is sort of a 2-stage trigger. And I have to say, this trigger takes a lot to get used to. There was a few of us who shot this, and we all had difficulty with it. It is adjustable, so your adjustable is how far the travel goes backwards. But I have to say, overall, the trigger, I was not necessarily very impressed with. This is the standard military pistol grip. There's also an adjustable pistol grip for this rifle as well. There are different components that go along with it. The optic I chose on here is a Mayopta optic. This is a Checkmate optic. Is extremely nice glass. However, this comes with different types of optics. This just came without one, so I've thrown one on here. The mounts that I use on here, the mounts that I'm using on here are the Armstrong lever mounts. I do want to take the optic off because I want us to take a look at the backup sights, which is unusual, but it is on this particular rifle. Now, this is a rudimentary backup sight where you have a flip, which pops up on the rear. Then we go to the front. We just have a blade that pops up. The front sight's a little bit seized up on here right now, but as you can see, we have a blade that flips right up as well. Now, looking at the side of the rifle, what we have here, we have a standard AK type bolt. The operating system is going to be a little bit different, so once we take it apart, you'll see the way the spring is on here. We have an ambidextrous safety, right and left-hand side. Now, what we have here to keep this rifle more reliable is, unlike the standard AKs, which have a very large opening in here where the bolt moves rearward. Now, as you can see here, we have some polymer or some rubber on here, which basically seals up the system here so no dirt or filth can get into it. Magazines. We have a proprietary magazines very similar to the G36 magazines. We have a AK-type magazine release, 20-round magazine, 30-round magazines. You can see they're clear. We flip it over to the other side. The one thing that we do have on here versus most AKs is we do have a bolt lock open. So we push upward and we're able to lock the bolt to the rear. So we do have the magazine is, when the magazine is in, bolt will lock to the rear. Drop the magazine out. Now we can either pull back manually or we can push downward upward on the bolt catch and it will release. We do have a 1913 rail. Now, the original military rifles would have a very beautiful rear sight on here. Obviously, this is designed for an optic. There's no need for the standard military type rear sights. Now, looking in the front, we have an adjustable gas valve. We have different positions on here for suppressed, unsuppressed. Obviously, we don't have suppressed on here, so we have basically two positions, a standard and an adverse condition. So we're going to show how this thing comes apart. Now we have the pins we're going to push in from the right-hand side. We do have to push inward on a release button to remove the upper and lower receiver. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the trigger mechanism. Now, the main difference in here versus the standard SIG 550 trigger mechanism is the trigger spring, which is lighter. But again, we have a very complex trigger mechanism, and overall, granted, these are extremely expensive rifles. Those who collect them, they love them. I have to say that there are certainly better triggers out there, especially for guns that cost upwards near around $10,000. So as you can see, we have basically just a stamped type receiver. So now we're going to show how the bolt carrier mechanism works. So to remove the bolt carrier group, we push downward on a release. We release the lever. So now we pull out the bolt mechanism. And as the bolt mechanism that we see here, this is identical to that of an AK. However, the machining on here is absolutely Swiss stellar. No question about it. You have a standard extractor on here, spring-loaded. And of course, your ejector is going to be inside of the receiver, as we can see right here. To remove the gas system, we push inward on the plunger. We have our gas valve, operating rod spring, and now we can remove our handguards to take a look at the heavy barrel, and we can remove our operating rod cover. Now, the nice thing about this here, we can see where we have our gas relief. And the nice thing about this system here is that it keeps everything clean. It keeps everything enclosed. Now, unlike our standard AK, where we have a operating rod spring that's in the rear, this is all one piece and it's all forward of the barrel. We have a very heavy braided recoil spring on here as well for durability and reliability. Again, as we can see from this barrel, this is an extremely heavy barrel. Now for reassembly. locks in place into the receiver. You take our hand guards, place our hand guards back on the top, hand guard on the bottom. Again, there are other hand guards that are available for this. We'll drop back in our recoil spring assembly from the front. Reinsert our valve from the front. Now we can see our bolt is very identical to that of the AK. Slide in, rotate, get that into the cam track. We're going to go into the unlock position. And once we have that in the lock position, push downward on your locking insert. And as we see when we pull the bolt mechanism back, it doesn't even need to be a part of the on the lower receiver. Now for reassembly. Now, very similar to that of the H&K, we have locking tabs on here. So we see we have a plunger. So when we have that outward, we have to push inward, and that locks it in the position. Push inward, you can hear it locking the position. And there we have it. So I said, 20 and 30 round magazines. Now, ammunition was very interesting with this rifle. Due to the fact that it was a 1 in 10, the ammunition this was designed around was a 62 grain, it was designed around a 63 grain projectile. I did not have access to any of the Swiss-made ammunition, so we had tried several different other types of ammunition. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the range and we're going to see how the sucker shoots. These things are supposedly known to be, extremely accurate sub-MOA guns. I have to say that the overall shooting impressions I had were not really that great. There were 3 different shooters. All of us pretty much got the same results, and most of them were not sub-MOA. Now, the best group that was gotten was shot by Brandon at the gun room in a .8-inch group, and that was with Remington 62 grain boat tail hollow point match. We tried the 69 grain ammunition, but with a 1 in 10-inch twist, stabilization was not that great. We tried a couple tap loads as well. So the average group that we got was around 1.5 inches with it. With the .8 was the best that anybody had put out with the rifle. So for $10,000, I would have expected this thing basically to have smart bullets that just basically seek their way to the center of the target, but that really wasn't the case. And I think a lot of it had to do with the trigger. The trigger was very hard. I know, speaking for myself and speaking, for Brandon, the trigger was very hard for us to get used to be able to use. It was basically a 2-stage trigger. There was no question, but when you got to that pull, it was just it was very heavy. The handguard was a little bit awkward. Is it suitable for a DMR type rifle? Absolutely. You're still looking at with a 5.56 under 400 yards. This would certainly do that. I'm sure if we would have had access to the proper ammunition, we probably would have had a better result. This was designed around a specific bullet, the GP90 ammunition, and we didn't have that. But overall accuracy for what this is versus the cost, I certainly would have expected more. Reliability, stellar. This is an extremely reliable, robust system, whether you put it in a 25.6-inch barrel or you put it in a 20-inch or 16 or shorter barrel. It's an extremely reliable system. Some of the rifles that came out in this particular variation did have threaded barrels, so you could use a suppressor if you so chose. You could put a muzzle brake. You could do whatever you want. This one was not. The way this one had come in, it did not have that. You had a point system that this has to make to come in. This rifle came in from Stan Swiss Arms. This is different from the original ones that came in prior to the ban. This was undoubtedly the least popular model of the SIG 550, 551 series that ever was. It just was not practical having this longer barrel. Again, there's only 2 sales that were ever made, and that was to the Swiss police and to some of the Jordanian police. It never had a military application. However, these command extreme amounts of money. I've seen these sell for anywhere from $5,000 up to $10,000. So again, I want to put another call out to Mishiko and thank you very much for loaning this to us. It's a very, very valuable weapon and a very big collector's item. I hope you all did enjoy this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.